I was considered a disgruntled employee, and a probably not a good employee, right? And I made a decision that this isn't who I am. Like, this is not the perception of me that I had at that department was not who I am and who I want to be and the type of officer I want to be. And it was simple as making that decision and going in and having that conversation with the chief. And it literally was just a 5-minute conversation, me saying to the chief, "Hey, chief, I know I haven't been the officer that you need me to be. I'd like the opportunity to be that officer."
Jay, what's up, man? It's good to see you in this setting. We don't often talk in a podcast setting, although we talk probably more than just about any other guy I talk with on a regular basis. So how you feeling about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I appreciate you having me on, and just an honor to be here, especially with the quality of guests you usually have. You know, not gonna lie, I gotta maybe question that quality now that you have me on.
Bring it down a little bit. No,
you're definitely bringing down the. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's important. I wanted to have this conversation because one of the things that I've noticed a lot of guys are dealing with is they don't have close personal friendships. And if they do know people, they're all done by default. It's the guy they went to high school with 20 years ago, or the guy that sits in the cubicle next to him, or the neighbor, or a lot of the times it's his wife's friend's husband. And men don't have this type of friendship and camaraderie and brotherhood. And I have a few close men in my life, and you are one of those guys. And I thought it was important to bring you on to talk a little bit about that, and also some of your story because of some big changes that you've made over the past, what has it been, 6-8 months now? 6 months, somewhere in there?
Yeah, about 8 months. Yep, about 8 months since I retired. Actually, 9 now, I guess. I retired in December. So
okay,
going on 9 months, yeah.
Well, the other thing that's interesting too is everybody always talks about, can we have a regular guy on the podcast? And I don't mean to say that to diminish who you are, but what I want people to realize is every single person is a regular guy.
Sure.
Even the guys who've done extraordinary things, absolutely very public, very extraordinary things, are just regular guys. But I think men relate with you and me a lot better because they see us as being closer to the same issues that they're dealing with.
Right. Yeah. And I think it is important, right? And I say, we should never put anybody on a pedestal, right? Because we're all just regular guys with the same struggles. Some of us are further along in the journey than others, but I can appreciate that. And I don't mind being called the regular guy. That's how I consider, that's how I consider myself. So.
When you say don't put people on pedestals, why do you think people do that? Because that does happen. It happens with me, and it certainly shouldn't, and it happens with other people quite often.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's a self-image issue, right? I think we don't see ourselves the way we see other people, right? So if we could, we might realize that we're not as far away from that person as we think we are. So we see these people who maybe have certain areas of their lives figured out, and maybe we don't have those areas, so we put them on this pedestal and think, well, I could never get to that. But it's a self-image issue, right? Like, if Ryan Mickler can do it, then I can too. It's just a matter of whether I want to put the effort in, right? And make the sacrifices. So, I think we just don't see ourselves the way we see other people. And then that's causes us to put them on that pedestal.
Do you think outside of the self-image that it's oftentimes an excuse? Because I see it that way, right? When you see a guy who, I don't know, let's take a larger than life figure, somebody like Goggins. Do you think people pedestalize a man like that because he must have some gift, some talent, some ability that's beyond my reach, and that's why I don't produce at his level?
Yeah, for sure. I would tend to agree with that. That's definitely one of the reasons, right? Because it gives us the out if we do that. And then I don't have to worry about, living up to that idea that if he can do it, I can do it, right? Because he's got something I don't have, which I don't subscribe to, but I can see people doing that.
Well, I wonder what they think a guy like that would have that they aren't capable of possessing. Because again, just to use Goggins, and I'm not picking on Goggins by any means. He's done some incredible things, and I know he's got his own demons that he deals and wrestles with, some of those very public. But what is it that people could possibly say that he has that any other man doesn't have access or ability to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly if it would be like a physical quality, but I think it's, you know, a mindset, right? And you know, for lack of a better term, a craziness, right? Like, oh, that's crazy. I could never do that, right? But the idea of us being able to push ourselves to that level just doesn't seem realistic. So he has some kind of inner quality, some kind of mindset, some kind of something pushing him that the rest of us don't have. And you know, listen, that could be true on some level, right? He's found something for him. It's, you know, and I don't want to speak for David Goggins, but what I know of him from reading his books, it's not, being a better man than his father, right? Basically, you know, changing his family history. And maybe some of us feel that we don't have that in our lives, that something so dramatic, to push us, right? And, you know, like for me personally, I don't have anything in my past that's like so dramatic that I feel I have to overcome it per se, right? But you know, as far as some kind of physical quality, I really think it's a mindset.
It is interesting because of all the guys I've interviewed, it seems like there is a common theme among many of them, not all of them, that they have some sort of a chip on their shoulder, that they feel slighted in some way in their past. They feel taken advantage of. They feel used or abused or mistreated. And in some ways they absolutely have. And in some ways every single person has, because It's the nature of being a human being that we're going to get taken advantage of and manipulated at times. But I think your point is right. They've managed to grab onto it and make it so clear and so vivid and so horrible, maybe even, that it just compels them to obsession, to compulsion. I think that's the word that I would choose when you're wondering what the word is laid earlier that they may not have. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly right. I think, you know, there's the power of suggestion, right? And it works both ways. If somebody, there's certain people that if they're told they can't do something, well, that's going to be their motivation to do it, right? Like, oh, you can't, you know, play college football. And speaking from experience, you know, my high school coach told me I couldn't play college football. You know, that motivated me to prove him wrong, right? But some people might take that and say, you know what, he's right. I can't play college football. And then they don't go after it. So I think that power of suggestion works both ways. So, proving somebody wrong or that chip on your, listen, I think some of the most successful people, you know, we always talk about having an ego as having an ego as something bad, right? But we all have an ego. We can't escape having an ego, but it's keeping your ego in check. But I think all successful people on some level have an ego.
Well, I think they're a little bit delusional, quite honestly. And I think I've been delusional at times in my life in a healthy way, not delusional to the point where I hurt myself or hurt other people because I'm oblivious to what's going on around the world, but delusional in the fact that I think I can do things that I have no right to believe I can do because I've never done them before. And all successful people do that. I remember early on in my financial planning career, I had a boss and a mentor who was exceptionally good in the business and ran the business. He owned the organization. And I don't think he fully understood how people perceived or viewed him or his limitations. It never seemed to bother him. And maybe that's a prerequisite for some level of success, that you're not totally tapped into what other people think about themselves and or what they think of you. And you are just, you believe you can do anything just because. I think it's a decision people make.
Yeah, again, it goes back to how you see yourself, right? That self-image. If we see ourselves as somebody like, and you've heard me say this before, I see myself as somebody that you know, I win. In the end, when I'm laying on my deathbed, I'm going to be able to say I won. And I don't mean that to be arrogant. I don't mean that to mean that I've never struggled, I've never lost. It's that I know I have, one of my core values is perseverance, right? So if you have that core value, if you have that belief in yourself that, you know, listen, you have that ready, fire, aim, right? You know that you'll figure it out. And you'll take some of that negative feedback, some of that positive feedback, and you'll figure it out. That's how you see yourself. So when you see yourself as somebody who perseveres or will figure it out, you're less likely to shy away from these challenges or these things that maybe other people are like, well, I could never do that, right? I can never, I'm not a runner, right? We're both training for a marathon right now. And how many people say, I'm not a runner, right? Well, if you're running, if you ran 5K, if you go out and run a mile, you're a runner, right? But if you believe you're not a runner, then you're never going to successfully complete that marathon. And I think that goes to every part of our lives, right? Like, whether it's your diet, your something physical, like, I have one of the things I have a sweet tooth, right? If I believe I have a sweet tooth, I'm going to have a really hard time passing on those sweets that are sitting out on the counter, but if I've said to myself, I'm the type of guy that doesn't eat sweets, or only occasionally eat sweets, it'll be a lot easier because that's the image I hold of myself.
It is interesting you're talking about self-image, because I think with the examples you gave, it's people saying things about themselves that are beyond their control. Like, I'm big boned. That's another one you hear. Mm-hmm. I actually saw a guy, he did x-rays of obese people and he did thousands of them. He's like, none of these people are big boned. They have the same bone density as everybody else. And these are people who are saying they're big boned. They're not. It's the same thing with a sweet tooth. If you have a quote unquote sweet tooth, then you're just saying that it's beyond your control, and there's just nothing you can do about it, regardless of how hard you try.
Yeah, for sure. And how many people do we know that struggle to lose weight? Because and I believe for a lot of people, listen, I'm not downplaying the struggle to lose weight, but they tell themselves, I have a hard time losing weight. I have a slow metabolism, whatever excuse they give themselves or reason they give themselves. If they believe that, then it almost, and not to sound woo-woo, because, it's more than just manifesting it. It's more than just positive thinking, but your self-image and what you believe and the beliefs that you tell yourself affects your unconscious mind and how that plays out.
Have there been times in your life where you had to just make a decision in the moment to change your self-image? And do you think it's that easy? So, for example, maybe you had a bad attitude about something in life, or you had a bad mindset, and then you just decided one day, well, nope, that's just not the kind of person I am, and it stuck. And what did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I have several examples of that, and one of them being at the police department. Some of this story. I was the first, I don't know, maybe 10 years of my career. At least the second half of those 10 years, I would have been considered, or I was considered a disgruntled employee, and a probably not a good employee, right? And I made a decision that this isn't who I am. Like, this is not the perception of me that I had at that department was not who I am and who I want to be and the type of officer I want to be. And it was simple as making that decision and going in and having that conversation with the chief. And it literally was just a 5-minute conversation, me saying to the chief, hey, chief, I know I haven't been the officer that you need me to be. I'd like the opportunity to be that officer. And he said, I like what you're saying. Let's do it. And from there, my career took off. I retired as a lieutenant. The next 15 years or so were very positive for me, and did a lot at the department between, running the PT, the physical fitness test and putting in a brand new gym and retiring as a lieutenant. Before I made that decision, I thought I was going to retire as a midnight patrolman. Not that there's anything wrong with being a midnight patrolman, but anybody who's been in that type of work knows that that's not where you want to be after doing it for 25 years.
Yeah, I can't imagine that. Again, nothing wrong with it because it's part of the process. It's like, me, when I was in high school, my first job was at Burger King flipping burgers. There's nothing wrong with doing honest work, but I'm not going to end up there. I shouldn't end up there. And I don't think anybody gets into the police department with the ambition of working graveyards for the rest of their career, for the next 20 years. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, one of the questions they asked, or they used to ask in the oral board was, do you ever want to be the chief of police? And in my mind, I'm like, well, that's a silly question. Everybody should want to be. We're not all going to be able to be because there's only one chief of police. But when I was getting into it, I want to go as far as I can. And if that means I'm the chief of police, then I'll be the chief of police. Like, does anybody answer that question differently? Because I'm not sure I want that to hire that person.
They probably do. They just don't work there.
Right.
Yeah. When you made that shift of the attitude that you had in the police department for the first decade of your career, and then you started shifting the way you looked at it and finished off strong, was Was there something that happened? Did somebody draw your attention to it? Was there some sort of negative consequence? Or did you just wake up one day and say, man, this isn't working for me, I'm going to shift?
No, there was some negative consequences, without getting into the gory details. I took some suspensions and had some pretty tough conversations with the chief. And I just realized, like, hey, this isn't who you are. This is not who you are. And whether it was deserved and a lot of it was, most of it was, right. I brought a lot of it, if not all of it, on myself. It just wasn't the perception that I wanted people to have of me. Right. That's what was happening. I was toxic, for lack of a better term. People were told to stay away from me, right? And that's certainly not, I think you know me well enough to know that is not who I am or who I want to be. So it was seeing the consequences of those actions and what it boiled down to was a little bit of immaturity, right? I wanted to do things my way. I thought that I had all the answers, and I had to do a little bit of maturing, but there was certainly some consequences that made me see that this isn't who I want to be, and this is not part of the vision I have for myself as a police officer.
Well, so you said immaturity, and I think that's true. And you talked about ego earlier. We see young men, myself included, when I was younger, full of piss and vinegar, and it's like, they have no idea of the real world and how this works, but they think they know. And I think it's part of the process. I see that in my oldest son now. He gets a little rebellious at times, nothing catastrophic, normal rebelliousness, a desire to be independent and free, to have some autonomy and control over his life. Is that where you think your toxicity stemmed from? Or was there something else that was causing you? Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but one thing I see with a lot of guys is they see themselves in a different position, and because they're not there, they're angry, bitter, and hostile towards the external circumstances that they created, and they convince themselves that those things happened to me, not that I created them for myself.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure that's the case for me. I think for me, when it came to immaturity and what I would call, there was like and I think this is a lot of men or in their 20s and starting out in their careers, there's this like false masculinity where we think we have to be something, right? And we overcompensate. And then, again, being young and thinking I had all the answers, I wanted to do things my way. I wanted to pick and choose the parts of the job that I did. I got to a point that I thought these things were happening to me. Like, why wasn't I getting this position in the department? And it wasn't because I was doing anything wrong. It was because, the chief doesn't like me. And that certainly wasn't the case. I wasn't showing him that I had what it took to hold those positions, right? He didn't see a leader in me. He didn't see that because I wasn't showing those things. So yes, I don't think initially that was the case. I think it got to the point where I did think for a long time this was happening to me as opposed to I was causing this. My behaviors and my attitude and my actions.
What did your wife think at the time? Because she's a police officer, retired police officer now.
Yeah.
Or is she still? She's retired.
No, she's
right?
retired. Yep. Yeah, we're both retired now.
Oh, she retired before you.
Yeah. She's been retired for almost a year and a half now.
So, what did she think? Were you guys at the same department together at the time?
Yes.
And what did she think about how you were showing up, and what kind of conversations were you two having about it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, my wife is loyal to a fault. So, we never had the conversation where she was telling me that I was wrong because she truly didn't believe it. I could say that, the sky was red and she would truly believe, Jay's right. So, she's loyal to a fault in that way. But she did help me see, the error of my ways in once I came around, right? Once I realized, where I was coming up short. And one of the things that happened was some of my negative behaviors in the beginning were not affecting her career. And I truly believe after a while, some of my negative behaviors were affecting her career. So that was a big blow to me too, right? Like I certainly didn't want that. So yeah, Tara's loyal to a fault. So there wasn't a whole lot of, calling out, for lack of a better term, because she really didn't see me as wrong.
Well, that's got to feel nice.
For sure. Yeah.
like how helpful it can be all the time, but it does feel nice, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good to know you have, like, you know, she's truly, like every marriage, we've had our ups and downs, but it's important, and, you know, not just as a wife, but as a fellow officer, it's important to know that somebody has your back. Right. And she truly, throughout that whole difficult period of my career, was maybe the only person who had my back, you know? So it was her support allowed me to figure it out myself. And then she supported me on the other end of it as well.
So when you decided to make this transition in your career, and obviously I'm sure it impacted other aspects of your life, how quickly did you see people responding? Police chief, fellow officers, family members, friends in your life? Did that take time, and were they skeptical about all of a sudden, you know, Friday the jerk leaves and then Monday this new guy shows up and he's awesome and helpful and a team player? Were they skeptical of that?
For sure, yeah, they were, and the chief always says, and he might have said it about me, but I don't know. He always says anybody can be good for 6 months. Let's see what he's doing a year or 2 years from now, right? So yeah, there was some. I mean, the chief, to his credit, you know, gave me the opportunity to prove myself. But yeah, I think it took some time, and I think there was some people who still saw me as toxic and didn't want to be around me, and when I say toxic, I don't even necessarily mean my personality, just you didn't want to associate with me. You didn't want to be grouped in with me. But you know, those things take time.
You're like
right?
the bad luck guy or something?
Yeah. Or just the listen,
guilty by association.
Yeah. There's, and this is not just police department, our police department, any organization, there's an A team, a B team, and I was on the C team, right? And you don't want to be on the C team, right? But you know, I think this goes for anything in our lives. You know, we erode this trust, and it takes time to build that trust back up, whether it's at work, with our relationships, right? You know, when we erode this trust, we know the change, right? At least I did. I knew I was different. I knew I wasn't going to go back to being that guy. I knew I had to change some things about myself. But that's great that I know it, but I got to prove it to the other people, right? In my life that this is truly who I am. Even what we do in the Iron Council, right? Like, you know, guys can make, if we're making these changes with our families, and I can speak to this directly with my anger, right? I had a lot of anger when I was younger, and that I don't know if lack of trust, but that my anger caused a lot of issues in my house with my kids and my wife. And there was, you know, they needed time to know that, okay, dad's not that. He's got his emotions under control. He's got a little bit more emotional awareness. He's not that guy that can clear a room because he's in a bad mood. You know, I knew I had changed, but I had to give them time to truly believe that I had changed, and not just that this wasn't temporary.
Well, there's another thing too that's really frustrating in life. Like, it seems like anytime we do anything good, it counts for less than any time we do something bad. So a place that would apply a little outside of the realm of what we're talking about is getting in shape. It might take you 6 months to really start to see some definition in your abs, to see muscle growth, muscle development. And then it takes 6 days for you to erode that. You go on a cruise and you come back and you're like, 6 months of work gone. But I also see it with trust too, is that when we're building trust, I don't know what the ratio is. Maybe it's 10-1 or more likely 100-1, that for every negative interaction someone has with us, we need 100 positive interactions. And that's what I think makes progress so difficult, because it doesn't move the needle as fast as negative type behavior.
For sure. And I think that's not just with other people, that's with ourselves, right? Up until, you know, I started doing the work on myself, I could tell you every bad thing that ever happened to me in my life, right? But I couldn't tell you the good things, or I had to struggle to find, but there was plenty of good and there was plenty of successes. And, you know, for whatever reason, I think it's human nature to focus on the negative and almost give more, I don't know, value is not the right word, but more attention to the negative, right? And I think that's a detriment for some guys to the work we do, right? Because it's, again, bring it back to that self-image. If all I'm focusing on is the negatives that happened in my life and the times I failed, it's hard to overcome that in our brains, right? You get what you focus on. So if you're focusing on things that have gone wrong in your life, you're just asking for more things to go wrong. But if you fall back on if you learn from those things that were wrong, right? Like there's lessons to be learned from the failures and the negatives, but then you got to learn the lesson and leave that behind. And then you got to fall back on the successes when things in your life aren't great, right? When I know, again, back to my mentality of I win, I know life is ups and downs, right? It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but when things are down, I can fall back on times in my life when I've been down and I've overcome it. The work thing being one of them. You've heard the story of the guy who ate the real J, ballooned up to like 300 pounds.
Yeah.
I can fall back on those times where I go on that vacation and I come back and I don't look the way I'd like to look. I know, hey, I've done this before. I can do it again. But if all we focus is on the negatives, it becomes hard to have these successes in our lives.
I think it's important we understand this. And as we're talking about it, it's got me thinking that this negative to positive ratio we're discussing is, for ourselves, I think it's a self-preservation method. So if I'm thinking about all the bad and all the things that could go wrong or did go wrong, then I'm going to be more vigilant towards the threats that I might see in life. And so it's self-preservation. And then I think for other people, when you're interacting with other people, it's a safety feature. It's a safety mechanism. So if I'm showing up powerfully for my kids, for example, they're not in any real danger. They know that. They're not in any danger if dad's showing up and he's the best version of himself. But if I'm showing up as a less than good version of myself, there actually is a real threat. I mean, we see kids who are neglected. We see children who are verbally and physically abused, or molested. I mean, this happens all the time. And so I think your point about placing a higher emphasis or indexing it greater is that we have to keep ourselves safe and secure before we give ourselves the freedom and opportunity to move into another realm, which is growth and expansion and progress. We have to have something safe in our lives.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're talking about self-awareness, right? And emotional intelligence. And, it's that whole, you got to take care of yourself so you can take care of those who depend on you.
Yeah. I mean, it is crucial that, I think it's the foundational thing. I'm learning that, with my daughter especially, is I've got to create this environment where she feels safe and comfortable to be able to express herself and then move into a deeper, more advanced aspect of our relationship. And it can prove to be difficult, I think, for men because we generally haven't ever really been trained to harness our emotions, to be that way. I've had a lot of conversations with people, men, yes, but also people who have had men in their lives, maybe fathers, for example, who they remember when they were younger being real jerks, but now that they're grandfathers, they're great human beings and their kids love them and everything else. And I think it is just a function of getting older, being more mature, maybe lowering testosterone a little bit. I don't know. There's a lot behind it that makes a man change over time. Being humbled, that gets him to think, maybe I should do this differently.
Yeah. And I also think for guys of our generation, it's just the way it was, is we were taught that the only acceptable emotion is anger, right? Stop crying before I give you a reason to cry. Right. And there was no conversation about, and that's, I think the intention was good there, right? Because, sometimes we need to be, that's part of emotional control but that's where it stopped, right? The stop crying before I give you a reason to cry. It stopped there. There wasn't, okay, what's going on? And I think that's what we're doing. One of the things we do here from working on being better fathers is having these conversations with our kids where maybe, my father was great and he was a great example of what it meant to be good at being a man, but there wasn't a whole lot of conversations about it. So I didn't catch it. And I'm just realizing now as a 51-year-old, wow, there were so many lessons that I just wasn't catching that my dad was giving because there wasn't a lot of conversation about it, but they were there. He was showing it by example. But I think the difference now is, like for me with my kids, is I'm having those conversations, which again is making them feel safe to express their emotions, right? To tell me what's going on, like, why are you crying, right? And let's figure out a better way to handle this than just crying about it.
I mean, that's so true. I think it's crucial that men learn to fill in the blanks because we have been taught lead by example. And I think that's important. Absolutely. But the people in our lives don't always understand our motives. They don't always see our actions. They don't even understand why we might be doing a thing. You know, maybe there's a reason you're doing it that way. How many times have you had your kids say, oh, Dad, that's dumb. Don't do it that way. And you're like, well, there's a reason I'm doing it that way. And why don't you go ahead and do it your way and see how it works out for you? And they do it and they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. But unless you're having those conversations, I had a conversation with my youngest son this weekend because he's gotten in the habit of exaggerating and overblowing anytime he gets hurt or gets scratched or he's wrestling with a dog. He's like, the dog bit me. I'm like, well, whoa, hold on. Let's review here. Like, what did the dog do? And it's like, well, I had the toy and we were playing and its tooth scratched my hand. I'm like, okay, that's what happened. The dog didn't bite you. Do you see that there's a difference? Or, you know, we might be wrestling and he slams it. I roll my knee on his finger on accident. He's like, you're trying to hurt me. I'm like, whoa, hold on. And so it's like not everything is an injury. Not everything is a slight against you. Not everything is you got hurt. It's just part of being a man. But it's those conversations that need to take place for them to understand why it's important, in this case, that we don't exaggerate things that aren't really there.
Yeah, it makes me think of, and we talk about this a lot in the law enforcement world, is autocratic leadership and democratic leadership, right? There's a time to be autocratic where it's like, you know, you're out on the road and shit hits the fan and you do this, right? And there's not a lot of conversation on why it needs to be done or how it needs to be done. But then there's a time for democratic leadership, right? And that's back at the headquarters when you're sitting in muster and you can have a little bit of a conversation and give people a little bit of buy-in on how you're leading them. So that for whatever reason, while you were talking, that's what I thought of, right? And it's the same with our kids, right? If you know, one of the kids is out in the street and a car's coming and they don't see the car, you're not going to spend a whole lot of time explaining why they need to get out of the road, right? You're just going to run out there and grab them and they're probably going to be like, Dad, what are you doing? You know, that hurts or whatever. The kid, why'd you tackle me and bring me across the road, right? And so it's same kind of deal. It just made me think of that. You know, there's a time to be autocratic and there's time to be democratic. And I think as parents and as leaders, we need to make that distinction.
Well, you know, there is a commonality between the two, and I think that's before the situation happens. Left of bang, I guess, is the term you might say, before a situation takes place, is that if you can build up the trust and authority and credibility with the people who will be impacted by your decision-making, they are just going to question you less. So when it comes to autocratic leadership, they'll jump a little higher or move a little bit faster if it comes from Jay, this version of you versus the old version of you. And when it comes to democratic leadership, if you have the trust and the authority and the credibility with them, your vote is a little heavier. Your impact is weighted a little bit more than somebody who doesn't have that same level of trust and credibility with them.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about when I was, you know, angry all the time, like, how could they know if what they really did was an offense, for lack of a better term? I'm talking about my kids. If I'm angry all the time, right? But now, you know, got my emotions under control. They know, well, that if I get mad, they're like, oh, well, maybe that was something I really shouldn't have done. But if I'm mad all the time, they have no idea, you know, is that really something I shouldn't have done, or is that just Dad being an ass?
It's like a swear word. The more you use swear words, the less impactful they are. But there's actually a really good place and time for an effectively placed swear word to get people's attention, to explain the gravity of the situation. But if you use it all the time, you know, you probably saw it in law enforcement. I saw it in the military. We see it in the self-development space. Guys who use the F-bomb every other word become, to me, less effective speakers because it's distracting. And what you're saying, half of what you're saying literally means nothing. Yeah. So be a little more precise with your wording.
Right. For sure. One of the 4 agreements, right? Be impeccable with your word.
Yeah. So when one of the things that the guys might not know about what you do is for the past, probably 3 or 4 years now, you have seen every single man come into the Iron Council, literally every single one. And you've worked with, in some capacity, every single man that's come into the Iron Council. In that time frame, are there things that you see are the biggest hurdles and roadblocks? I'm not talking about circumstantial roadblocks. I'm talking about mindsets and behavior and attitude that men have that all of us need to be aware of so we don't slip into those same patterns.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the biggest thing is that it's not okay to have those traditional masculine traits, right? I think we've gone so far I think this is a problem in just about, all areas of life. We take things, to extremes, right? And we have it's part of your mission, this attack on masculinity, but it's not masculinity which needs to be attacked. It's the false masculinity that needs to be attacked. So I think there's some confusion out there for a lot of guys that come into the Iron Council on what being masculine or what being a leader in their family, what that looks like, right? And you talk about this a lot, and then we abdicate that role to other people in our lives, our wives, whatever the case may be, because we're not stepping up and taking care of those traditional masculine roles. And I don't mean like cutting the grass and changing the oil in the car, although those probably do fall in the masculine category. I mean about that, what we talk about, the protect, provide, and preside. I think guys really come in the Iron Council wondering what that looks like if you're being a true leader in your life.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about some real world application of this. One that came to mind is a man who's proud of who he is versus a man who's arrogant about himself. Similar vein, right? We can make the argument that comes from a similar place, but being proud there's nothing wrong with being proud. Having pride, I think, is a little different. I don't know, it might just be semantics, but arrogance is really where it becomes to be an issue. But then you also have somebody who I would suggest is a leader versus a dictator. And there is some overlap. Strong personality, large vision, a desire to move the needle forward. There's some overlap between dictator and leader. And yet 100%. We know the line. And go ahead.
It's a fine line, right? It really is a fine line, right? Because so think of the difference between the guys who practice some martial art so that they can, the protect part, right? Whether it's jujitsu or something else, and the guys who go out and look for fights in the bar on Friday night or Saturday night, right? Like there's a fine line there, right? Well, maybe not so fine, but the when I think of false masculinity, I think of the guys who go out. They're the guys who, some guys walking by them, they give them the shoulder. Then there's a lot of pushing and shoving and screaming, and what really those guys are hoping for is that the bouncer gets there quick and breaks it up, right? But you're never going to see that that's false masculinity, but you're never going to see that from the guy who trains jujitsu, right? The guy who does Muay Thai or boxing, right? Because there's no need to exert this false masculinity when you know that when the time comes, you will be able to protect yourself and those who depend on you. But that's a fine line, right? It really is a fine line because you can see where, I don't know if I can see, but I guess almost understand that where these people, these guys like ourselves, we fall in this category who take care of ourselves, who train to protect our families, seem to somebody who doesn't know any better, no different than the guy who goes out and gets into just a fight for no reason on a Friday night in a bar. But there's a huge difference, right? It's a fine line. And I think that's where some of the confusion for some of these guys come in, right? Because society is telling them that, that's this, if you go to jujitsu or you go to Muay Thai, like that's toxic masculinity, right? I hate that word. It's false masculinity that these people are worried about. And the guys who are in the guys and any guy who's ever been in a jujitsu gym talks about this, right? Those are the nicest guys, and they're the guys that they're going to walk away from that bar fight because they know there's no reason to get into that. They're not protecting anybody. They're not, right? And it's not part of their training. It takes a bigger man and a more masculine man to walk away from that silly bar fight, in my opinion, than it does to sit there and push and shove and scream and shout and hope the bouncer gets there before you get punched in the face. But that blurry line is what causes guys to not know what being a truly masculine and what protect, provide, preside really means. So I think a lot of guys come to the Iron Council looking for those answers.
How do you know when you're engaged, and not just false masculinity, I like that description, but how do you know when you're engaged in behavior that is not serving you? So, for example, that could manifest itself as playing victim. That seems like it's real. It seems right, especially when you feel like you're victimized by your boss or by your wife or by society or by fill in the blank with your excuse of choice. It seems real. And sometimes it's not so black and white that you're either an asshole or you're a good guy. And I think that's where a lot of men get into trouble. So how do you, as a man, evaluate your beliefs, your behaviors as to whether or not it's serving or helping you and what you might be falling prey to without even realizing it?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first thing we have every new guy, or one of the first things we have every new guy in the Iron Council do, is create a vision and identify their values, right? We give them an exercise to identify their values and their vision, and that's how you know if the actions you're taking, in most cases, you have the opportunity to, does this fit with my values? Does this fit with my vision? And if it doesn't, then you need to change your behavior, right? I think it's one of those things. It's maybe simple, not easy, but because it seems so elementary. But when you have a clear, compelling vision on paper, like everybody in the Iron Council does, and you have identified your top 5 values, decisions become a lot easier to make, and the actions you take become a lot clearer. For me, one of my core values is family. So if I have to choose between, listen, if I have to choose between, and this happened, right, with Uprising. I missed the first Forge event, right? And it killed me to miss the first Forge event. I love your events and believe strongly in what we do, but, I had family obligations that weekend. It was an easy decision, right? And that's saying a lot, because, I try not to miss any of your events, right? So family being one of my core values, I don't regret missing the Forge event. Would I love to have been there? Sure. But I had family obligations that weekend. So having that, if I hadn't identified family as a core value, and it almost seems like, oh yeah, of course family's one of your core values, but is it that elementary for everybody? I don't think so. I think there's probably guys that, I'm going to miss, my son's play, and I'm going to miss, forget what else we had that weekend, but we had other stuff going on that weekend family wise, because I really want to be at this event. But for me, it was an easy decision.
Yeah. I think having that litmus test before you get into the situation is really going to spell it. It's like in law enforcement, I imagine, and I never have been, but I imagine that the more that you train ahead of circumstances, the easier it is to deal with circumstances when they arise. Like if you're trying to pull your gun out of your holster for the first time when you're dealt with a violent criminal, it's going to be a little hard compared to if you've done it 1,000 times on the range, practicing over and over and over again, just in the way, with your uniform on, with your vest on, with all of your other gear that you have on, in the same sort of circumstances. You really have to know ahead of time. Otherwise, you'll just make bad decisions. Like an example I often reference is guys will say when they cheat on their spouses, they'll say, well, I lost myself in the moment. It's like, well, first, no, that's not entirely accurate. You lost yourself in a lot of moments because you let it slip into that. There was the casual flirting. There was the innocent touching on the shoulder, on the hip. And then it translated to you staying at work a little bit later because you guys had work to do. And then it was more flirting. And then it became physical in nature. So you lost yourself in a lot of moments. But if you actually knew the way that you were going to conduct yourself around women who were not your wife, you wouldn't even let that happen in the first place. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's that old saying, right? And hopefully I get this right. You don't rise to the level of the situation. You rise to the level of your training. And this is what we do in the Iron Council is no different, right? And having those rules to live by, which is our vision, our values, our again, make those easy decisions easy, right? If you already know that, in your vision, the type of husband you want to be, and that's certainly, I don't think any of us set out to, even the worst philanderer, I don't think he set out getting married to cheat on his wife, right? But if you already know the type of husband you want to be, and you have that written on paper, and you're clear about it, and you're taking those daily actions to reinforce that, right? We come back to that self-image because it all starts in our head with an idea, right? And that's our vision. But that's great if we have this vision, but if we don't do the work to reinforce that vision, then it doesn't become part of who we are, right? This is that, and you've heard me talk about this, that head, hands, and heart alignment, right? And it's important in that order, right? Because it starts in your head, then you got to do the work. And once you do the work, you reinforce that idea or that vision that you put on paper, that's the man you are, right? Because what we push guys to do is think like big picture with their visions, right? Not stuff that maybe might seem initially like, oh, that's going to be really hard for me to obtain. It makes them a little uncomfortable because that's where they grow, right? But once they start doing the work, which for us is the battle plan, right? The objectives and the daily tactics, then it starts to become who they are, and it reinforces that self-image. And then again, it becomes real easy. If you see yourself as somebody who does not cheat on their wife, who does not put themselves in compromising situations with other women, then that's not going to happen. But if you don't see yourself that way, you can easily let that happen and find yourself in a situation that maybe you're going to regret.
Well, and I like that you say, and also it's the action. And I'm not saying in the example you use, you should go put yourself in compromising situations so you can prove that you actually believe what you say you do. But are you actually going to do it when you're tempted not to? Are you going to avoid the casual flirting with the woman at the office? We'll see. We'll see if what you say really matters, or if you're just paying this thing lip service. We'll see if you really care about your health when you wake up and you're tired, or maybe you sleep in. Are you going to go to the gym this afternoon and make up for it? We'll see. That is to be determined. But the guys who do that, of course, they're going to have better lives, better relationships, better health, better self-confidence. It's better all around when you do that. And it takes time and a lot of sacrifice, but it gets easier over time too.
Yeah. You have to, and we talk about this in our council all the time. You have to do before you can be, and then you can have, right? A lot of times you hear it as be, do, have, but first you got to do, then you can be, and then you can have everything you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jay, what do you want to tell the guys? I mean, you've led a pretty good career, at least half of it based on your own admission, right? And now you're into retirement. And how has that transition been? And what are some things that you've learned that you did not fully anticipate in that transition?
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned is, and this has been fundamental. It's been a huge change in my mindset, is that, we don't always know why things happen to us, right? And we don't always know why we made the choices we made at the time we made them. And there was a long time where I held a lot of anger towards myself for some of the decisions I made in life. But now that I'm retired, the last 8 months, I've had some time to reflect on those, and every decision I made was exactly what needed to be made at the time, and has put me in the situation I'm in now, right? And it has allowed me to do some things that I just never would have pictured, or maybe thought about, but thought were not going to happen, or were kind of out in the distance, right? Whether it's like, I bought the property out in PA. I'm a college wrestling coach now. I would have never, I wanted to be a college coach my entire life, all through even my law enforcement career. I would have liked to have, I thought about how cool it would be to college coach. Didn't necessarily think it would ever be as a wrestling coach, because that's not really where I played college football. I wrestled in high school, and I loved the sport of wrestling, and coached youth and high school wrestling for years. But it's become a true passion of mine, and I wouldn't want to coach football at any level at this point in my life. But, one of the things is, one of the reasons I was angry for a lot of years, and probably struggled a little bit in the beginning of my law enforcement careers, because I didn't think that I wanted to be a cop, right? And there was some truth to that, right? Meaning, I always knew in my heart that I wanted to be a coach, but the reason I didn't go into coaching was because, the reality is they don't make a lot of money, at any level, at the professional level, but at the college and high school level, you don't make a lot of money, right? And I thought when I was 25 years old that I needed, the good salary, the pension, the benefits, and in hindsight, that was all true. All the reasons law enforcement was always a plan B. But plan B allowed me to now execute on plan A. I'm young, I got 51 years, and not worry about those things, right? I'm set with a pension. I'm set with benefits because I went that career in law enforcement. Who knows what would have happened and where I would be if I hadn't, right? But now I have that opportunity, and just one of the things that I'm grateful for is that I'm kind of seeing, and maybe we never find out, right? I like to think that and I'm a Christian. I like to think that when we die, we find out why certain things happen. But I'm getting a little bit of that now in my life is understanding why some of the things, because God had a plan for me, and that plan is coming to fruition. Because I'll tell you what, I maybe I shouldn't say this, but on paper I shouldn't be a college wrestling coach. But I know what I bring to the table, and I know the value I add to the young men at Delaware Valley University, and I'm just honored and grateful to be there. And I think I totally went off on a tangent. I'm not even sure I'm answering your original question.
Just things you've learned and experiences you've had. I think it is good when it starts to come together because things are moving. And I believe this is one of my core values too, that things are conspiring for us, even the things that we don't feel like they are. And,
right.
The adage is you have a plan and God laughs. Well, he's got a plan too. And I believe that, but we don't get to see it. And there's certain times in our lives where it all comes together and you think, oh, got it. I understand now. And that's got to feel like a pretty good place to be. Well, Jay, how do we, I'll say it this way. Obviously, I hope it's obvious that guys, if they want to connect with you, one really good way to do it is inside the Iron Council, because you are one of our Iron Council coaches and you helped write a lot of the curriculum for what guys are doing when they first come into the IC. And not to mention that you're there so they can connect with you and join a team and be engaged in the conversations that you're having, which is a really cool thing. But outside of that, how do the guys learn more about you, connect with you, and get to know more about that book that I'm still going to convince you to write here? I don't know what you're calling it, but they're like J-isms or something. Yeah. And there's a lot of them. I haven't even heard them all, but there's a lot of them.
I don't have a name for it. I got a little rough outline of the book, but Ryan, I'm not. I was gonna say I'm not on any of the social medias. I do think I still have an Instagram account, but I don't ever go on there. For some reason, I'm banned on Facebook from the Uprising event. I don't know. I went on Facebook and because for your events you have a private Facebook page, and then I after the Uprising event I shut it down. I went back on for the Forge event, and I couldn't get on. I don't know what I did, but
you were associating with me. That's probably the problem.
Yeah, maybe.
They haven't banned me yet.
Yeah, well, listen,
maybe
guys,
I'm bait to bring all these guys in, and then they just ban whoever's following me. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. No, I think you said it. I think, and I would encourage guys to if you want to connect with me, join the Iron Council, because I think forget connecting with me. I think that's if you liked what we talked about today, you'll just get more of it, and you'll improve your life by joining the Iron Council. But I think that's where I'm the most active from a worldwide, for lack of a better term, perspective.
Awesome, man. Well, we'll sync it up, and the guys will see you in there, which I'm glad about. And Jay, I just want to tell you, I really appreciate you. I appreciate our friendship. We've known each other for a long time now. And you've gone through some things with me, the ups and downs that we've both had in our lives. We've had private conversations that I won't share here. I've shared a lot of my struggles. In fact, I remember when I was going through my divorce, you were the first person I called. And I had a conversation with you about what I was dealing with. And I was in a really devastated place at that point. And you stood by me the entire time. And that means a lot to me. And I hope that I enhance and add value to your life. That's one of my goals. But more than anything, you do for me. And I just want you to know that and tell you how much I appreciate you for that.
Yeah, and I'm right back at you. I appreciate that you've allowed me that level of access to you and trusted me, and in turn allowed me to lean on you when needed. So I value our friendship more than I can say, and just totally appreciative of you and the movement that you created and the tools and systems that you share with men, and totally honored to be on the podcast, like I said in the beginning. So appreciate you and appreciate everything you do.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.